Hey, it's another live stream, and my name is Jesus Castillo from Ruby Guides. So today I want to cover a few strange and special Ruby methods. And here I have a few of these, and we will see why these are strange. But you can probably get an idea already just looking at this. Yes, these are methods. So as you know, methods do things and they're associated to classes, right? So you can have an empty string, for example, and I can get its size. How? By using a method, right? So it is not like I'm accessing an instance variable directly. This is a method I'm calling. Notice that I'm calling the method with this dot and the name lowercase on an object, and there are no parentheses because the parentheses are optional in this case, right? So that's a regular method, but then we have more strange methods, right? And for example, this method right here, integer, float, and array. So here's what's special about these methods. If I take integer, this is a class, it's a constant. Why is it a constant? It's a constant because it starts with a capital letter, right? So if I use it like this, all I get back is the class name. I just get the class itself. I don't get the method. Like if I would do size or even puts doesn't take an object, right? Because it is part of the kernel module, so it's kind of like a global method, so it doesn't take an object, but and you can run it like this. It doesn't even need parameters, and what happens, you get an empty output. But what's going on in here? Well, this is a class. To make into a method, we need the parentheses. That's why these are strange and special, because these require parentheses. Normally, you don't need the parentheses, right? So we leave them out unless we need them for another reason. But for this case, we need the parentheses. Why is that? Well, because the parentheses allows you to differentiate, to tell the difference between the class and the method, right? That's why these are special and strange methods. Because first, because they start with a capital letter, most methods don't. And second, because they require the parentheses, okay? Also notice these methods are not called on any objects. These methods were kind of like puts, right? So what are these methods useful for? By the way, if you're new here, you can say hi on the chat. This is a live stream. You're watching later, you can leave a comment. My name is Jesus Castillo from rubyguides.com, where you can find many Ruby tutorials to help you improve your Ruby skills. Okay, so let's take a look a bit more close to this integer. And also, by the way, I'm recording this on summer and it's pretty hot over here. I don't know, where are you from? Let me know in the comments or the live chat if you're watching live. I'm from Spain. Okay, so we have this integer. Let's take a look what it does. If I don't pass any arguments, of course I get an argument error because it requires an argument. As you can see here, raw number of arguments. How many arguments? Well, you can tell from this thing. It says given 0. Yes, that's correct. We given 0. That's us or you as the programmer. You give 0, so that's not the correct number. So what's the correct number? You can tell from here. You don't need the documentation in this case. You can tell from here how many arguments are expected. It says right here, expected from 1 to 2. So this is a range, which means you can take either 1 or 2 arguments. So let's try with an integer. I get 1, I get 1 back. Okay. How about a string? A string is converted also into a 1. So that's basically what this does. It converts whatever we pass it, if we try to convert it into an integer. But wait a moment. What's going on in here? Why can't we just do 2i? Right? Doesn't 2i do the same thing? Doesn't 2i mean 2 integer? And the answer is yes, exactly. 2i means 2 integer. So what's the difference here? Why do we have this? And why do we have this? Why do we have 2 things for the same thing? Well, we have aliases for a few things, right? We have aliases, which sometimes can be confused with things that do different things. So let me give you some examples so understand. So for example, we have dupe and clone. These are methods that are not aliases. They do similar things, but they have small differences between them. So that's one thing to know, right? There are these kind of methods. They do very, very, very similar things, right? They make copies. They make a copy of an object in this case, but there are small differences that you might want to know. If you need to know them, they are quite advanced material, but there's one kind of method pair. Then we have a different kind of method pair. We have size and length, right? What's happening with size and length? Well, the difference is there are aliases, meaning there are just names that it doesn't matter which name you use, you will get the same results, right? So that's different from dupe and clone. Dupe and clone, yes, they do the same thing, but slightly different. So they are quite aliases. But with size and length, there are literally aliases. So what's the case with or 2i and integer? It has to be one of these 2 options. It has to be either we have binary methods that there are aliases. So that's option number 1. They're aliases, meaning they're exact clones of one of another. They do the same thing, do this exact same thing. I want to emphasize or give more remark the exact part, right? They're literally aliases of one another. They use names, different names for same effect, right? Same different names, same thing. Okay, that's another way to understand that. That's one option for method pairs. The second option is that there are small variations. That means same goal, same kind of goal, same kind of objective. We want to do the same thing, but small difference in result. Okay? So that's the 2 kind of methods, pair of methods that you can have, right? If you know this, now whenever you find methods that are similar to one another, then you can say, okay, are these aliases or there is actually small variations? Or it could be theory. It could be that they are completely different. They just look the same, right? So that could be like a third option. They are just different, but they look similar. But mostly you want to classify in these two options. So this is a very interesting tool to use when you're learning Ruby. In here, what's the answer? What do you think is the answer? Well, is this. Actually, this pair of methods, and remember this has to be with the parentheses, otherwise what you have is not a method but a class, is this, small variations. Same goal, a small difference in results. Okay, so that's why we have 2i, and that's why we have integer. This integer kind of strange method, right? That's why it exists. So what's the difference? Note that we find out, we determine, we decide that we are dealing with two methods with same goal, but small differences, small variations. We have to ask and find out what's the difference. Oh, here you could experiment. It's always fine to experiment on IRB or Pry. By the way, I cover Pry in my Ruby book. And it's the first chapter. It's all about Pry tricks. Why would you want to use Pry? Things like that. That's the first chapter of my book. Yeah, back to what we're doing here is we have found out you could experiment. It's fine. I recommend experimenting. So that means we can try different combinations. We can try, okay, what happens if I do 2i? What happens if I have letters? Oh, I get a 0. Look at that. I get a 0 when I do a letter 2i. Isn't that interesting, right? We have Brian Astacio. He says, hi. Well, welcome. If you're new here, welcome. If you aren't, well, thanks for watching and thanks for your support. Yeah, isn't that interesting that we get a 0 when we don't have a number, we have character? Well, as you might imagine, that could lead to problems, right? Because maybe you're not expecting this A, but then you call to I on it and you get 0. And you're going to be working from the assumption, from thinking that you have an actual number, but you don't. You have a character. So how can you, if you need for sure a number, deal with that? Well, here is where the integer comes in, right? So remember, the integer and 2i, there's pair of methods. It's a pair of methods, right? Let me write that down in case you understand that. Pair of methods. Methods that are similar to each other, and in this case, they have small variations. Right? Small variations. Same goal, small difference in result. Well, if we experiment and see what happens, okay, with 1, we already seen that, we get a 1, 100, we get 100. Now what happens if we try with a character? What do you think will happen? Well, we can do like drum roll, find out, and we get an error. Wow, isn't that interesting, right? Because before we didn't get an error, we just got 0. And to I just said, okay, you give me you don't give me any numbers, well, I guess that's just a 0. Whatever, right? And this could be anything else. Even an empty array. An empty string. We still get 0. But with this form of the method, what happens is that we get an error, right? In fact, it says read the error. It's very important to read the errors, because here's what happens. A lot of people that are learning Ruby, especially newer people that come into programming, they ignore the errors. They go right away to mess around with the code without understanding what's wrong with the code. Well, the errors are here to help you. They are not against you. They're here to help you. So take a moment to understand the error message, because Ruby is trying to communicate with you. It's trying to tell you, okay, here's what's happening. Sometimes this is not explained in plain English in a way that's easy to understand, but as you gain experience, this is where experience comes in, right? You see the same kind of messages, right? This argument error, it is like a category of error, right? With experience, you get to understand these errors and get a better understanding what's happening, why this error happens, right? So in this case, it's a invalid value for integer a. So what's happening is integer from this, before reading the documentation, which I also recommend. So for learning about new things, you want to do these two things, which is one, experiment, right? Experiment, like, and two, read documentation, read books, read documentation, books, etc., courses, videos. Of course, you don't read a video, but you understand what I mean, right? These are the kind of things you can do. So now we found out that integer is more strict, right? It doesn't allow anything that doesn't include an integer to actually pass through this method. It's like a filter, right? It's kind of like a filter. So if you use this, you need to keep this in mind. And you need to know that you need to handle this error. Okay, I teach you how to handle errors in my Ruby book. You can also find that in the blog. Of course, in the blog you have to go search for it, and sometimes I will have less details and things. That's why I recommend the book. But you can also find there information on how to handle errors. So if you're going to use integer, that's good, but you need to learn how to handle the error during the running of your program, right? So basically that's called the rescue, begin rescue block. That's how you handle the error. And there is one more thing about this integer, is that in Ruby 2.6, so this version 2.6, and you can find out the version, by the way, here's a little trick for you. You can find out of the version of your Ruby that you have, being inside or in Pry or IRB, with this constant, Ruby underscore version, or uppercase, that gives you your Ruby version. And if your Ruby version is greater than or equal to 2.6, then you have a new option, because you see Ruby is evolving, Ruby is improving all the time, right? So I recommend that you learn Ruby. If you had any doubts about that, I recommend that you learn Ruby, because it's still improving, and it's a very solid, very well understood programming language, right? So yeah, if you have a newer version, one of the newer features is this. You can say integer, for example, a, and then we pass a second option, exception false. And now we get different behavior. Notice what happens. We get nil instead of a 0. Now, this is different. This allows you to differentiate, to tell that this is not a number, right? So this is different from this. Again, right? And also remember that when you call integer, it says expected 1, 2. So that means 1 argument or 2 arguments. Well, the second argument is this one, this exception option. What does this do? Well, it turns off this error. Instead of getting the error, which you can handle with the begin rescue block, well, you can do this. You can disable that and get nil instead. So what happens if it's a valid number? Well, you just get the number, nothing changes, right? If you just get the number, nothing changes. But if you get something that's not a number or an empty string, then you get nil instead of 0, right? Because if you get 0, you don't know if this is not a number. But nil is definitely not a number, so that's different, right? So that's why this is a very interesting and strange and special Ruby method. Similarly, you can do the same for floats, right? With float like that. And float, we take the number and it gives you floating point number. So that's basically a decimal number, right? So there is that. We have some Purna Chapagain. Sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly. I am from Spain. How about you? Okay, any questions about this? I hope you learn something new and interesting. Yeah, to review, when we have pair of methods, which happens a lot in Ruby, right? Because in Ruby, one of the things that is special about Ruby, and you should learn it if you are not learning it yet, is because we have different different ways to do the same thing. But these different ways have a meaning to exist, like I just demonstrated, right? We have small differences, and that gives you more options and more power as a programmer. Unlike other languages, which might be more strict, or you might have less options. So that's another reason to use Ruby. And when you have this pair of methods, as I covered, we have two kinds. One where we have aliases, and the two where we have the same goal with small variations. And we just see in this example with the integer and the toI methods. Oh, and one more thing, by the way, what is this call? So notice that here I have this colon. Well, this is called a keyword argument, right? The special kind of argument called keyword argument. If you're not familiar with the different kinds of arguments, I have an article on my website, rubyguides.com, where I explain the different kinds of arguments. So we have like default arguments, keyword arguments, variable arguments, all of these kinds of arguments. In this case, this corresponds, I believe, to a keyword argument. Let's find out. Well, I think we will have to check the documentation for that. But usually these kinds, it can also be another kind of argument, which it looks like this on the method definition. So it looks like this. It has two asterisks like this. That's another kind of argument, right? So that's more things to learn, I know, but it's very interesting all of the things you can do with Ruby. Okay? So if there are no questions, then we are done for this live stream. Please click the like button for me so more people like this, can find this video. Also, like button on other videos if you haven't yet. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here so you miss out on live streams, so you get a notification when there is a live stream. If you are subscribed and have notifications enabled, okay, you get a notification. And visit my website, rubyguides.com. rubyguides.com. Thanks a lot for watching. I will see you in the next video.